So hello, welcome. I am Lou Kiwanuka. I'm founder of the Ops Nest. This is one of 3 industry sessions that we do each year, which are open out to the whole industry. Our next one is on the 9th of December, and that's our kind of end of year wrap up that we do with industry editors to get their perspective on what's happened over the year and if we've moved the needle on anything at all. So before I crack on with this session, just want to say thank you to Unity, who are our platform provider and host, and also Sorensen, as Francis is translating for us at the moment for anyone listening in who requires BSL interpretation. And then David will be taking over from Francis shortly as well. So final quick one on logistics. If you would like to add any comments, any questions, you can do so by clicking the chat button. And if you can just use the global chat part of that would be great. I'll have a look at that and pick up any questions as we go along. Right, on to the best bit. So this session, we've been doing a bit around technology in the Ops Nest recently. And this session, we wanted to specifically talk about technology around accessibility. Because while tech is opening lots of different doors for us in lots of different ways, we also have to acknowledge that tech that hasn't been well thought about can often close doors as well, and make things harder for our audiences to participate, to even get to an event, to understand the event, and to also enjoy the event. So while I've been thinking about how I wanted this session to run and the kind of people and perspectives that I wanted to bring into the conversation, I was thinking in terms of many different aspects. One being that kind of real digital information side of things. 2 being kind of around data. 3 being what unintended consequences of change. So even if the change might be positive, what are the unintended consequences that can sometimes come out of that? But I also wanted to really look at what technology could be like within the event space and accessibility within that in maybe 5 years' time or even further into the future. So as I was thinking around those things, there were 3 people that really did spring to mind. First of all, Rachel Belliere-Wilson. And now I have the pleasure and joy of working with Rachel on our Ops Foundation course each time we run it now. Rachel has got lived experience both in life and also working in the events industry as quite an inaccessible world, an inaccessible space. So she brings brilliant knowledge and understanding that she readily imparts to us in the Nest on a very frequent basis. So thanks very much, Rachel, for promising to do the same again today. Then it's been a while since I've caught up with Gavin on anything to do with the Ops Nest, but when I think about technology and accessibility, Gavin always springs to mind. And Gavin brings to this conversation a real kind of entrepreneur's view of accessible technology and how you create technology that's fully embedded in some of the kind of context that we're going to be talking around today, and has just a real vision for what the art of the possible could be and should be. And then Tom is a more recent addition to the Ops Nest family. And I met Tom at the London Experience Week a couple of months ago. And what I really, really wanted Tom in the room for is really that kind of next level view of how technology and equipment and audio can really bring experiences to life, but not just bring them to life, but improve life as well. So we've got a panel of 3 people coming from quite different kind of perspectives. And I'm hoping that collectively we can unpack some of the key topics. So any questions from the panel before I get cracking? Or have I missed anything? Hokey smoky. Right, let's go. Our first kind of question is around where is technology brilliantly improving accessibility, and where isn't it brilliantly improving accessibility? Actually, where is it standing in the way of accessibility? So in this question, I'm looking for real world examples of kind of success and failure. What tech does work? Where have we seen tools unintentionally exclude people, either through complexity, through bad design, or just not even thought about design, or even around kind of assumptions about users' ability or resources? So, Rachel, can we come to you first for this one, please?
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm gonna kick off with actually something that's now fairly commonplace as an example of where tech has opened doors, and that's in the world of speech to text captioning in conferences. And this is kind of becoming much more of an everyday thing. And whilst it might not impact, let's say, 70% of that audience directly, in actual fact, I think it does subtly. And what it does is it brings visibility to active inclusion. And I personally feel it makes a really good statement about the organisers of that event. They're saying, we're here, we're actually listening, we're actively looking to make a difference. But subjectively, I find personally, I'm not deaf, I'm not hard of hearing, but I find myself really paying attention to those words and actually reflecting back on, particularly when it's a panel discussion, what's been said, and actually what did that really mean? There's a lot of words that go on at conferences, quite a lot, aren't there? And sometimes it all happens very quickly. So I find it really beneficial, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that, to be able to actually have a reference point back. But I love personally the visibility of it. It just says inclusion to me. So it's something really simple. It's not expensive. It's becoming much more readily available. And I applaud the organisers that are embracing that along with other ideas.
Yeah, actually, can I just interject on that one? Because I agree. And one of the things that you have said there is that it's a signpost, it's a sign that things are changing. It's really visible. And I think one of the things that sometimes people need to kind of get beyond is that, making one change at a time, like putting in captioning is a step that you can make. Okay,
exactly.
It might not be the 100% solution, but just having that one change on there is an open door to then having more changes and understanding more as a result as well.
Completely agree. It's one thing at a time, isn't it? And just making a difference, starting somewhere. I completely agree. So yeah, that would be my sort of the thing that sort of sticks out for me as the one thing that's coming readily into our conference spaces now, as an accessible and inclusive improvement. And I think on the flip side for me, where tech is still failing and hasn't really made the leaps forward that I would have expected, is really at that front end stage, at registration, at website design, where we're still finding that some stats run by Scope and Attitude is Everything recently state that over 50% of people with disability are still finding websites and registration sites inaccessible or incredibly difficult to navigate. And that's a really poor stat. And for me, until we get that right, we're not going to see more people with difference and disability and lived experience coming into the conference space, because if they're not able to actually get past the registration stage, or they're finding that difficult, it's not really putting a good stake in the ground for what they have to expect of the actual conference space itself.
Yeah, and actually when we one of the further questions, not to give it all away, but one of the further questions around data, and that's the key section that we're missing, isn't it? The data that you could get at that point could really help user experience going forward. And it does feel like it's at the moment a really unthought about element. Gavin, can I come to you on that? So the question is, where real world examples of success and failure? Oh, you're on mute, I'm afraid.
That was never going to happen today, was it? I like to do these mistakes first so everybody else feels comfortable.
Thank you.
That's the best way to do it. I perfectly agree with Rachel there about the digital experience. It has to improve. It has to improve. But I'll just refer very briefly to my background. As Lou mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur, but I wasn't. I was a guide dog mobility instructor training people how to use guide dogs. So I was a professional who saw a problem from the point of view of my clients. And I think the point of view of the client is crucial to everything that we do. Now, I'll be very foolish not to mention my solution because it exists for this very reason. It's out there and it's doing amazing work in this area. And it's all about the ability to communicate with somebody before they arrive. And that starts with digital. But it's the arrival of the person at the venue where your staff member feels like this person is going to be feeling more comfortable when they arrive, and I am more comfortable to actually interact with them. But of course, it's from the disabled person who's feeling comfortable about arriving. And that starts, as Rachel said, from the digital experience. And then confidence that is translating into an active interaction. And that's what Welcome does. It ensures that happens. But and I could talk about so many different items that, like this, even the signing today. I mean, these are things that make a massive difference. But what I'd like to just mention very briefly is the things that we're failing in. And this is a real parallel, but it feels like it's not connected to physically where we're failing. But only 17% of disabled people are born with disability. So that means that there is a massive proportion of people who are becoming disabled. And it's not like you don't go, oh, I'm disabled, and then all of a sudden all these things come through the door about being disabled. And technology is one of those things that you don't get taught about. It's not, you don't know about, the cone underneath the pedestrian crossing box? It's not, I've gone blind, now I know about it automatically. People have to be told about the technology that can help them. And you look at Apple, or anybody goes onto their mobile phone and goes into accessibility settings, all of the stuff exists. It's knowing that it exists that is the greatest challenge for technology providers. Is how can you help me? And you don't even know that it exists as a disabled person. You don't know how you can be helped. So I think that's where we need to up our game. We need to improve how disabled people learn about the technology that's out there to help them.
Actually, where as you're saying that, it comes back to that kind of the communication bit around when people are first thinking about coming to an event in that regard, isn't it? Because we're not telling people why they should feel confident in our space. How are they ever going to take a guess?
So just adding in very quickly there is nobody here that is involved in events who doesn't say, do you have any dietary requirements? Everybody says it. Would you like the vegan option or the vegetarian option or the carnivorous option? But we all do it. It is, and that didn't exist. It does now. This is not impossible. Do you have any access and communication requirements? Should be standard on every single event through Eventbrite or whatever it might be. It's easy to do.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've heard from Gavin and Rachel. Tom, how about you?
So again, wholeheartedly agreeing with both Rachel and Gavin. I'm coming from let's say an observer perspective, and I practice empathetic design and salutogenic design, meaning salutogenic design is the path to designing for mental health, physical health, emotional health, and well-being. And empathetic design is understanding human problems and challenges. So someone that's spoken on panels and attended numerous conferences in incredible spaces, the things that tend to sort of jump out are that we're not talking enough about neurodivergence and inclusivity with those that don't have visible challenges navigating spaces of extreme sensory overwhelm. Now, if we unpack what's supposed to happen, You go and you probably want to meet a bunch of people, swap some business cards, learn some things, and then get the heck out of there because it's so intense. Now, technology, I think, can definitely help, particularly with this, what we're going to get to in a minute, which is the pre-onboarding, the hyper-personalization of the experience. Knowing who your customer is before they arrive, you can help them, be kinder, and provide a better service to them if you know what their needs might be. And that includes the degrees of neurodivergence, which, again, how do you know where you're meeting someone where they are when they arrive, and the noise levels, the lighting, the HVAC system, the temperature, all of these things can be triggers, and we just don't know how it's affecting people. So going back to this baseline of, well, what can we do to support the human nervous system? Is there technology? Are there solutions that can do that? And are there environments within these spaces that can leverage technology positively to downregulate the nervous system? Because ultimately, that's the problem. We are literally in fight or flight, hyper-vigilant mode at all times because of the noise level, the visual stimulation, the lighting, the sense, if it's one of those kind of spaces. And you know, you're literally on edge the whole time, on guard, watching out for what our brain's basically thinking is a saber-toothed tiger or a bear or a wolf. But essentially, you know, that's how we've been wired. So if we can kindly give people an opportunity to downregulate, moments of respite from the mayhem, I think that's where we should be going. And there's definitely tech to do that. The advent of hearables. So we're getting to a point now where the devices that we're putting in our ears are literally monitoring heart rate variability. This can help in a number of ways. Knowing how triggered you are at that point, maybe you could get, you know, the event organizers could have an integration with an app that could suggest, we can see that you're probably not coping very well with this environment. By the way, over there's a really lovely down-regulation space, a chill-out space, a relaxation space. There's so these are the kind of things that I think we should be considering, leveraging technology to, in real time, if you like, assess how navigating that event beyond the essential signposting, getting where you need to get to meet the person you need to meet, and then retaining information with captions, whatever. I think beyond that, it's actually helping people not freak out.
Actually, I'm going to add into the mix here because I think this is something that tech has failed in, which at least kind of adds to the complexity of the event space. You know, if you look at the changes in audiovisual technology over the last 10, 15, 20 years, you know, 20 years ago, plasma screens on stands were unusual because they were so expensive. Now our event spaces are full of technology that's broadcasting out either images or sound or both, all against each other, and that kind of cacophony of tech that's now on our show floors, I think, is an area where we're failing in. It's great for a whole bunch of people who love that sensory kind of heightened stuff, but if you take a show floor from now versus 20 years ago, the soundscape would be totally different. And I think we're not clocking it. We're not understanding the impact of that. And therefore we're isolating a whole bunch of people, myself included, actually. So I feel quite passionate about it. One of my next question, because it lends in very nicely to Tom, what you're talking about in terms of hallucinogenic design and empathetic design, is, so I'm going to come to you first, is how can event organisers intentionally design accessibility into the customer experience, especially where tech is involved?
Well, I think that crucial part is, again, being mindful that you need to learn a little bit, if you're willing to sort of share the information in advance of who your customers are and what their needs might be. And we definitely have the platforms to deal with that and to help support. But unless that sort of barrier to entry, even as we talked about, the registration part, ridiculous. I struggle with that as well. You know, have it as simple as, well, okay, I'm in now. Great. And does it provide for my needs? awesome. If we have those as unknowns, we're automatically going to go in there being anxious and nervous. And I think trying to break down those barriers initially through this sort of interface, let's just interface first and be empathetic, really understand the needs. And then it's just looking at the environment. I mean, I think we need to, to your point about acoustics, we need to rethink how fire-resistant fabrics that absorb sound are deployed within event spaces, particularly huge ones that are, echo chambers. Above a certain decibel range, and it's probably around sort of 60, 70 decibels, we are literally in fight or flight mode. Now, hospitals fight with this. They're around about sort of 80 to 90 decibels. And you can imagine we're almost at kind of concert levels of noise, thousands of people and with those big screens and those, sound systems now are ridiculous. You're literally competing with sound system and audiovisual. So can we cocoon these mini experiences, these worlds where people are trying to share information or sell something? Can we cocoon them so that you go into that and then you can come out and step outside of it? And then the next one is cocoon. And it's a lot of fabric, and then somewhere out there's a fabric supplier is going to do very good business in it. It's that simple. Let's just put them in defined spaces so that there is some way of absorbing the sound to reduce that sound impact level, which triggers the nervous system in a negative way at all times, in order to help everyone.
I like that. Actually, as you're talking there, we've got an ops on coming up later in the year, which talks about, which we're doing some creative rigging and stuff. So how do we use the roof space within our event design and fabrics and different textiles? So we'll definitely be coming back to that. I think that's in November. Rachel, I'm really, really keen to understand your view in how organisers can go about starting that process of intentionally designing spaces.
Well, I think the first thing that comes up for me, Lou, is I would put everybody through the Ops Foundation course because we devote nearly a whole day to this subject. And actually, if everybody just immersed themselves in that just for one day, they would come out a lot wiser. But I think that would be a big goal, a big box ticked. But failing that, it's easy to become overwhelmed with this subject, because as we just kind of covered off earlier in this conversation, there's so much that could be done. So I would encourage people to start small and not overwhelm yourselves, and think about one change from 4 perspectives, from the point of view of hearing, sight, mobility, neurodivergence. And for me, the biggest thing that would make a huge difference, which is a big key turning moment, is if organisers were to just take the blinkers off about who they involve in that design and delivery process. So the only way to truly embed change is to involve people that live these experiences. So if we could involve people with difference and disability at the creative brainstorm stage, at the design stage, at the points, the touch points of delivery, those are the real ways to start embedding real and lasting change, and to continuously learn.
I'm really ashamed of our industry. I'm just gonna put it out there, because when you look around to try and find people with lived experience in our industry, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And I will always remember going with a friend of mine to an industry event, and I felt that's what I felt. I felt ashamed of our industry. We were at an industry event, and the event was so clearly like most of the other events that I go to within our industry, both inside our industry and for other industries. And the one thing I can't get out of my head and don't ever want to get out of my head was that this isn't normal. I go to lots of different places and I am designed into lots of different environments, but this one, not at all, haven't even been considered. And you can tell that because there's nobody else like me here, and I don't blame them, because if I wasn't here with you, I wouldn't want to come either. And I think that we have to start looking at the solutions for that. And I agree, we need to be employing people who don't look like us, who don't have the same access as I do. And if we are not able to do that immediately, then bare minimum we should be employing organizations and people like yourself, Rachel, who with lived experience, because it's not the best solution. We need more people in businesses, in the fundamental planning core basis of businesses. But if we can't have that, then let's make sure that we're getting that expertise, kind of firepowered in. Sorry, I feel like I just went on a soapbox.
Yeah, and I think, just to add to that, the narrative needs to change, because the stock response to that is, we don't really have people that have disability coming to our events. The reason you don't is that they aren't fit for purpose. They're not designed to enable everybody to interact in that space inclusively and with choice. So something has to change, and we can either continue along that narrative and nothing will change, and we will continue to exclude 25% of our community, or we can start making a gradual shift. Just make one change.
Yeah. Fab. Right. Well, I'll get off my soapbox a little. And Gavin, let's come to you next. So the question around this is, so what can event organisers do to intentionally design accessibility into customer experience?
Again, it's a slight parallel. Empathy is everything. Empathy is everything. I always say employ more disabled people. That's ultimately. But I know it's difficult to find people who have the specific skill set. But then, of course, the skill set of a disabled person joining your company is, I understand what your clients need. I understand what the people who are visiting need. So empathy is everything. But I would also say that training is only one aspect, and there's a thing called the half-life of training, which is from 1885. Was a German psychiatrist who realized that if you learn something within 24 hours, 75% of what you've learned has gone. And there's a massive challenge there. There needs to be the ability to, empathy is one way of that popping into your head, because you go, I care about that. It reminds me of something I learned because I cared about it. So empathy helps in that regard. But also knowing something needs to happen. And Tom sort of mentioned this as well. So just a brief example, we launched with Welcome with 16 Currys stores across Ireland. And a person going to Currys, rather than waiting for a quiet hour, can now say, when I arrive, please have the music turned down. So I've had lots of people doing this where the music is all turned down. Somebody said the other day, I'd like to learn about air fryers. And they had actually gone online and found out about air fryers for this visually impaired person because they knew who was arriving. Of course, the empathy helps there because the person is already en route to going, I need to help this person. But of course, there now has to be the feedback from that person who's visited to say what they've actually done. Perfect example, because Currys is not an event, but we launched with Headingley Stadium, Yorkshire Cricket Club. So Headingley became the first stadium in the world to actually offer Welcome. And it means staff know who is about to arrive, but then get a crib sheet, which is a reminder of the training they've got, layered on top of the empathy. So empathy with knowledge, which is involved with training. And then after that training, there needs to be an aid memoir or some way of that training to constantly be reminded. Empathy is everything, though. It starts from, we build anywhere from there.
As you were talking then, it was just reminding me of one of the big problems we have in the events industry, which is that kind of seasonal, kind of temporary staff issue that we have in events, where events aren't running consistently throughout the year. People at that front of house space will have worked on another front of house space 24 hours earlier, will have such little knowledge of that event, and that's why I love Welcome, and we've worked with Welcome on our OpsNest live events for a number of years now, because that kind of, that it's not just technology, it's thinking about the whole problem. There's nothing worse, and Rachel, I think you've noted in some of our pre-event chat stuff, so I don't want to steal your thunder for an answer to the next question, but I think it is relevant here. Nothing's worse than giving your information and then no one doing anything with it, and I think that kind of that actual process for bringing that information into reality and understanding, I think is something we really need to focus on and concentrate on.
Well, I'll just very briefly on that. If after an event, if somebody gives a feedback, and that feedback comes not just to the event, but to the third party who's delivering accessibility at an event, I can turn around to the third party or the actual event, and I can say, you did a bad job, because I have 10 people saying that you didn't introduce yourself when they arrived. You're no longer allowed to use our service. I have never had to do that, though. I've never had to do it, because the feedback itself from the managers who go, oh yeah, no, my staff actually want to do this. So there needs to be that feedback on how well somebody has done. And it has to be acted on, not just by the event, by a third party who's saying, we've seen it, and here is your stats. This is what I'm feeding back.
Actually, do you know what it's like? It's like we went through these questions before and they all ran in good order, because the next question I've got is around data, funnily enough. So that segues really nicely. So how do we use data to help us understand where human interaction is needed versus technology? So I've been in some conversations recently on a totally different subject, where they were like, well, no, we want to do it all on our personal manual way. They don't want a template, they don't want a crib sheet, they want to do it in their very own personal way. I'm like, not so scalable. We're fine if you're talking about 2 people. What about 2,000? So we do need technology in our space to manage some of this stuff, but we also need to understand where that human interaction is essential. So let's talk a little bit. I'll come to you, Rachel, actually, because we did just, this is the question I just need your answer for. But can you talk to us a little bit about some of where you've given data, you've given information, and what's happened then?
Yeah, I mean, I think the collection of data is a minefield, actually. I think the intention is always good, but I don't think it's always well implemented. So for a start off, is it getting to the right people? So I would question, can everybody with different accessibility needs even access that survey information if it's being delivered technically? And is it going to those people who didn't attend, not just to the people who did attend? And why didn't they attend? So, I think there are different avenues to explore there for a start off. But to your point about what then happens to the data, I'm a survey responder. I will always respond to any survey, and actually, I will even actively give my feedback, even if I haven't received a survey, which is very often the case. And yet I have very little evidence of anything being done with the information, the feedback, which I have always given in a helpful manner. I have no evidence that anything's then been done about it. And moreover, I don't always even get a follow-up on that from anybody. So what was the point, actually? And I go again to those industry events the following year, and very little has changed, if anything. So we continue to make the same mistakes because we're not listening to the people who are giving us really helpful, valid advice about personal experiences around access and inclusion.
I don't understand that. I mean, I know there's a lot to do in an event. There's a lot to organise, and I do know there's a there are times where you kind of wrap up a show, stick it over there, and then start the next one from scratch. So something we always try and encourage in the Ops Nest for Ops people is use your post-event report as a starting point for your next year of planning. Like, don't have a start and stop. Use that feedback. That's the start of the next year's event, not the end of the last one. And if you adopt that process, it's really hard to then forget that feedback, because it's, you make some quick decisions what you can change immediately, and you set an objective of actually that was going to take a bit longer to work on, but we'll make a plan by this time.
But I think this is where the problem is of differentiating between what we ask for through digital forums and then what we gain through a conversation. And for me, that is always on that. We've got some feedback here. Let's dive a bit more deeply. And that for me isn't happening, and certainly isn't happening frequently enough, if it's happening at all. So I think our tendency as event organisers is to stay pretty top line on the information that we're asking for feedback on, and it's probably on information that matters to us, that we think perhaps needs some adjusting or tweaking, or actually that we want to get some great feedback on because we know we did that really well. And there are things in us all that need that reassurance. But actually, if we're not asking the really big questions and the big open questions that actually do give us rich information, we are never really going to start to evolve. So those are the things that we're falling short on for me: the follow-ups and the always asking one more question. So what would make this a really great experience for you? Rather than saying, what accessibility and inclusion needs do you have? What would make this a really great experience for you? You're going to get very different answers.
Yes, I love that. Okay, we need to pin that as our sentence that we need to be asking. Tom, can I come to you next in terms of how do we use data to understand human interaction versus technology?
Well, we can learn so much, and the tech is ready right now. I mean, we are in that sadly dystopian future where we're being measured all the time. The quantified self is now, and therefore we can leverage that in a positive way, an ethical way, a socially responsible way for positive mental health and wellbeing outcomes, if we just know how to work with the algorithm and the tech. And this comes down to a simple thing. Hello, organisers. Let's have a chat around a table. Let's get people that are able-bodied, disabled, neurodivergent, sensory designers, and let's have a big chat about what we really need to do here to address the needs of everyone, to be inclusive. And here's our motto from our company: we care deeply. Do you? It's a simple line, but do you really care? What is your agenda here? Is it bottom line? Is it margins? Is it just getting people through and then having statistics to prove, oh, we smashed it out of the park this year with, is the most successful? Hold on a minute. How do people feel about that? What were their take homes? Did they actually retain the information, and did they enjoy it? Did they come out a gibbering wreck? I mean, I go to these things all the time, and I'm telling you, I'm destroyed after a conference. Literally, I have to have like a day to kind of decompress afterwards. So understanding that this is all about nervous systems and meeting people where they are, and then leveraging what we do know, and then this opt-in opportunity. I mean, you don't have to share everything, but the really crucial stuff you could share in advance, that first touch point, the website, really simply, can we learn more about you to help you deliver a better experience? Exactly what Rachel was talking about. That understand what you want out of it, and then start now. If the event is back end of next year, start now. Start reaching out. Start. You've got mailing lists galore. Learn, listen, and then see where there could be some shortfalls from the last experience, and then how you can bring the experts in that know what they're actually talking about through lived experience and observable experience, and then mix, as Rachel was saying, the combination of qualitative and quantitative. Yes, you can measure things with data, but also you need to have human conversation about what's actually happening behind the scenes here, and then what's happening on the floor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Tom. And Gavin, coming to you next. Oh, you're back on mute, I'm afraid.
Still got a mobile phone. I have to put my finger up here today. So I think one of the problems we have currently, and I come from a charity background, 18 years, is when you mention the word access, everybody thinks about physical disability. Access and inclusion is everybody, but we don't record any of this information. If you just look at airports as an example, there is a PRM team at an airport. They are persons of restricted mobility. So if you have a hearing impairment and you need help, there is going to be a staff member who gives you a wheelchair or says, I'll push you to the gate, because they don't understand that there are disabilities outside of mobility impairments. And what they really don't understand is that mobility impairments are actually a very small percentage of disabled people and their needs. So what you then have to do is have to try and find a way for people to feel comfortable about sharing that information. So, and normally when it comes to the Cambridge Analytica nightmare scenario, where the information is, the data is everything, and they don't care about how they get it in their unscrupulous way. If you provide a service like somebody can help you better if you let us know you're living with epilepsy. And I set a situation up with Vindolanda Roman Fort, where I let them know I had epilepsy before I arrived, and every staff member had watched a video on epilepsy the next day, or the morning of my arrival, so everybody knew a little bit more about first aid for epilepsy. But of course, after that, I was then able, from Welcome's perspective, to actually say, we did that at Edinburgh Airport, Silverstone Museum, a perfect example, so many visitors. I can say to the people who use the data, and I'll come back to that in a second, I can say to the people who use the data, 20% of the people who are using the service in the last 6 months are hearing impaired. 15 or 20% are neurodiverse or express neurodiversity. 5% are living with dementia. 15% have 2% are guide dog owners, because it's a very small proportion of people. But I can give them that data. And this is the problem. We're collecting the most remarkable amount of data that has never been collected before in these kind of environments. But finding the people at the end, the partner who's actually going, oh, I can do something with it. Because that's a complete job function within an organization. It's people who know how to use data for their advantage. If you talk to Microsoft, Google, Apple, Currys as an example, they go, oh yeah, give me the data. And the data ran the solution. But when the solution, if you imagine a jet, going back to aviation, a jet flies across the sky, the pilots don't give a monkeys about the jet stream, but the jet stream exists. But if Wilbur and Orville Wright had been asked to create jet streams, they would have never flown. They flew, and then the data followed. Then you need the people who can identify the data and then utilize it. And that's the challenge we have, is working with the organizations who actually know that the data is useful to them and then can incorporate that into service delivery.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. It comes back, it loops back, that kind of with the registration side of things, because most people within the events industry that are data driven sit in the marketing divisions, and the people like who are creating the environments are the ops thing, and that disconnect, and that full loop of how we give people information about the environment, and then how the environment's used and needs to be adapted. That whole loop just isn't, from my understanding, isn't where it needs to be right now. We have kind of run out of time, but I really want to ask my last question. So if we keep it to one sentence, if we got it right in 5 years, what would an inclusive event experience look like? Rachel.
Oh, one sentence. Okay. It would look like a space where every customer would be able to navigate, access, and feel included through choice, through being given different avenues to explore that experience in a way that means something and resonates with them. And by that, I mean, simple things like from that initial stage of registration where everybody would be able to access that registration site, where there would be everything implemented through screen readers and clicks on the keyboard rather than use of mouse, that it's written in plain English, that it's considered through the design, the colours, the font size, the whole shooting match, the whole shooting match, and that it isn't just about how we've engaged with that event technically, but also from a people-centered perspective, that we make every event people-centered.
Right, we're sticking that up on our vision board. Gavin, what about you?
So this isn't so much a vision as a plan. So as I mentioned earlier, we launched with Headingley Stadium the other day. There are between 50 and 70,000 stadiums in the world. The vast majority of them have events in them as well as the actual sport itself. My plan over the next 5 years is to be in every single stadium in the world where there are events. And we're the first proximity-based staff training tool in the world. It's doable. My mission now is to make sure every stadium has it. Where I'm talking to 2 senior Premiership football clubs this week. So in 5 years, invite me back. If I'm not in a good percentage of those football and sports stadiums by then, improving events for people, then kick me up the arse.
I love that. Thank you. And then Tom, final one from you.
So I'm hoping for greater communication to initiate this process, for greater compassion, for greater connection, so that when you actually attend an event, you're felt more listened to and included, more calm, and then just sort of feel complete. And any more C words we can think of that are pleasant? Yeah, contentment. So I think those sort of 4 C's in there make it kind of, just let's come away calm and contented, so that you've learned something, you haven't felt triggered, you've felt cared for. There you are, cared for. So that's it.
I think collectively your vision, I think it would be amazing if we got there in 5 years. I think you're right that having the customer focused experience opens up a whole gateway for possibility. And I think I'm just going to wrap this up with, I'm excited about the potential that the events industry has got. Now we're starting to recognize some of the negatives, some of the doors we've shut just by technology advancements. So we shut doors to kind of a calm and quiet environments. We're now having quiet spaces embedded into events. That's a good sign, but there's so much more we could do by designing in at the core. We've got loads of takeaways. Thank you so much for joining us. We have over the last few years, and we'll continue to talk about the topics around designing events more effectively in the Nest. So if you want to hear any more about the Ops Nest or the course that Rachel very nicely plugged for me, thank you very much, then give me a shout. But otherwise, thanks so much to Rachel, to Tom, to Gavin, and to Francis and David, our interpreters, and to the team over at Unity. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much.